Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us at the January webinar of Topics at the Nexus of Climate Change, Fisheries, and Blue Foods. My name is Laura Anderson. I'm the Engagement Project Manager at the Stanford Center for Ocean Solutions, and we're glad to be one of the co-hosts through the Blue Food Futures program of this webinar series. As you can see from the logos on your screen, this is a webinar series that's hosted by a number of different UN Ocean Decade programs and projects. Blue Food Futures Program, FishSCORE, Fisheries Strategies for Changing Oceans and Resilient Ecosystems, the SUPREME Program, Sustainability, Predictability, and Resilience of Marine Ecosystems, the SmartNet Program, Sustainability of Marine Ecosystems through Global Knowledge Networks, the FishMIP Project, Fisheries and Marine Ecosystem Model Intercomparison Project, and the endorsed project Becky, Basin Scale Events and Coastal Impacts. I'm going to add a link in the chat. Oh, Claire has already done it. Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. Where you can learn a little bit more about the programs and projects that are behind this webinar series. This series highlights current events and challenges at the climate fisheries nexus. Presentations and discussions will range from data-driven efforts to better understand oceanographic and biological changes affecting fisheries to how the results can be used to inform fisheries management, aquaculture, and sustainable food decisions, as well as the many ways people and broader communities are being impacted by and adapting to changes in marine ecosystems and marine resource use. The topic of the January webinar is managing fisheries in a changing climate, and we're excited to have two great presenters today, Dr. Emmanuel Mbaru, who will be giving the first presentation on transboundary fisheries governance in the Western Indian Ocean under climate change, and our second presenter, Ferran Bustos, who will be presenting on Adaptive Fisheries Assessment in a Changing Ocean. So we'll start with Dr. Mbaru, who just a short introduction, is working as a senior scientist at Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute and is also a postdoctoral research fellow at Lancaster University. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Mbaru for the first presentation. And after that presentation, we'll have some time for questions. We'll turn to the second one, and then we'll have more time for questions at the end. So Dr. Mbaru, thanks so much for sharing your work with us. And I think you might be still muted.
Yeah, thank you, Laura, for that wonderful and amazing introduction. Yes, I'm Barry Manuel. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Lancaster University. I wonder whether I should turn off my video, just keep it so that you can concentrate on the topic. All right, so I'm a postdoctoral fellow based in the UK at the Lancaster Environment Center, and I am one of the beneficiaries of the AXA Fellowship. So my project is one of the decade actions that was funded by the AXA Research Fund, and I'm working with two colleagues at the center, that is Nick Graham. Hopefully some of you are familiar with him, and Christina Hicks as my promoters. And I want to acknowledge Ken Free as well from Kenya. So I am also a senior research scientist at the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute based in Mombasa, Kenya. So this work is part of the larger project that I've been doing for the last 2 years. For this particular study, this is a review kind of article. It's a systematic literature review that looked into the issues of transboundary governance in the Western Indian Ocean and how these countries, through their regional fisheries bodies, address, the emerging challenges of climate change and how climate change also impact on fisheries. So you may not see all these fancy graphs and infographics because it's a review article, so there's no data that was used in this review. Want to move to the next slide? Here we go. Are the slides moving?
We're not seeing them move. We're still seeing the first intro slide with the title.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not moving either from my side. So here we go.
Why
with the
don't you
first
stop
technical
sharing
hitch.
and we will switch to
Yes,
my computer.
I'll do exactly that. Okay. Sorry
Okay,
about
perfect.
that.
Can you all see that? Okay, here we
I
go.
can see it. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. So maybe move on to, so this is the WEO region. It's Area 51 under the FAO demarcation. Next slide. Next. Yeah, there's some degree of animations here. So yeah. So these are the countries. So the Western Indian Ocean region covers like 11 countries that range from Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Madagascar, South Africa, and some island states such as Mauritius, Comoros, and Seychelles. There's also the presence of France and the island Reunion. Next. So all these countries in this region are very highly dependent on small-scale coastal fisheries. And amazingly is that 47% of the people that live in these areas, 47 of those live within 100 kilometers of the coastline. Next. Maybe you can just click. Yeah, and the region is really critical in terms of its contribution to the overall landings of the fisheries catches within the larger Indian Ocean region. The fisheries sector alone generates about 9% of the gross marine product. And of that 9%, 87% is from large-scale commercial fisheries, whereas small-scale fisheries account for 72% of the total landings by volume. Next. Of course, there are large political entities that have fishing access rights in this region. That's fine. That's fine. So in the form of distance water fishing nations that have bought some licenses in this region, and they exploit some of these resources for their countries and other economies as well. So climate change is real, and it remains one of the long-term threats to our marine ecosystems. Here are some of the images or figures that have been published in other studies by William Chung, who has been very instrumental in this topic. He's done a lot of modeling, and you can see how the changes in sea surface temperature and how that affect catch, as well as the overall catch potential in around the world. Next. But in as much as there are many, maybe go back a bit, in as much as there are many impacts related to climate change, there are two main ones that are very critical, and that is changes in productivity. Then the next one is distribution of fish. But to address these challenges caused by climate change, it is important that we manage our resources in a way that responds promptly to these, threats. And that is why the governance framework is important. And just to understand what governance is in a broader context, is that governance entails, institutions within societies where they come up with priorities and systems and cooperation among all these institutions in order to achieve certain objectives. So in a nutshell, there are key things that will be critical in any governance structure. There will be institutions, some of them might be formal, some might be informal. There is need a change in behavior in order for governance systems to be effective because some of these issues are dynamic. You need resources to implement some of these priorities. And you also have to understand the problems that needs to be resolved through actions that will lead into regulations or sanctions that can be applied across different levels. Next. But that's just governance. There's now transboundary climate governance, and in this case, we are looking at the ocean, which is the area of interest in this study. And it is kind of a multinational, a multi-level scenario, because anytime you discuss transboundary governance, what comes to people's mind is institutions or countries that span across seas, and all these countries have their own national regulations, which are also signatories to global conventions or treaties or agreements. And for all this to develop, you need scientific information that can feed into this management framework at the various levels. Next. So, so in a sense, within the fisheries realm, transboundary climate governance has often been discussed from the multi-level or polycentric nature, and governance is often implemented at the international, regional, national, as well as the local level. Next. So in this review, we had two research questions. We basically wanted to understand the current and future challenges of transboundary fisheries within the Rio region. And then we looked at the interventions that are needed to ensure a timely response to these challenges. Next. And to give you an idea of why the Rio region is important is because I'm sure you've come across a lot of literature that says, although, emissions are produced across the globe, in Europe, in the US, where most of you guys are, but the region that is expected to be affected the most is actually the tropical areas, and the Western Indian Ocean is one of these areas that sits within the tropics, and you can see already there's some studies that have been done by Francis Massac and others, and it shows that the stocks of tuna are actually moving further east, I guess. So these changes in productivity will need new harvest policies as well. Like in Seychelles, where we have the biggest cannery in the Indian Ocean, that cannery is at the risk of getting closed, because if the stocks move to other areas, then it will no longer be viable to maintain that tuna cannery in Seychelles. So these are some of the real impacts that the region is facing, and there's a need for people to understand, the response that the world can have, or the region can start to think about in considering the pending impacts of climate change. Next. Yeah, so yeah, the stock movement requires effective transboundary institutions that can address this threat. Next. Yeah, so there are institutions that have been established under the United Nations Feedstock Agreement, and in total we have 4 regional fisheries management organizations in the Rio region. There's the South Indian Ocean Deep Sea Fisheries Association, or SIOTFA, and then there's the IOTC, there's the COC, as well as CIOFA. All these bodies were established to address issues of migratory fisheries, as well as non-migratory fisheries, both within the national, within the territorial waters, and also waters beyond national jurisdiction. Next. So let me delve straight into the key governance challenges. So we realized that all of these regional fisheries bodies have a very poor record in fisheries management and governance, in the sense that in their performance reviews, most of them are below par. So this is a very serious concern in terms of sustainability of the resource, because management is key. They do have limited regulatory powers. And here I mean that the recommendations that are done by these regional fisheries bodies, some of them are not necessarily binding to the member states. So in a way, there's a disconnect between the recommendations made at the regional level and how those recommendations can be enforced at the national level, because most of the fisheries are still under the jurisdiction of the national institutions. And although countries are signatories to these treaties, it's not clear how those regional bodies can force or enforce countries to adopt or implement those recommendations. So yeah, even the law of the sea convention is still suffering the same challenge as well. There's very limited cooperation in the management of fisheries, because some of the countries are really, developing countries, and they are not as stable as you would expect. And because of this informal nature in fisheries management, it becomes harder for them to cooperate with other institutions or other countries to manage those fisheries. There is no formal agreement or understanding that clarifies transboundary governance processes. So here I mean that the treaties are there, the recommendations are made, but it's not very clear how countries are expected to engage. And finally, there's also some financial constraints in terms of developing the human capacity as well as the technical capacity by the national fisheries authorities to enforce some of these recommendations. Next. So we can now focus on climate governance. Those were basically general governance challenges that might be related to climate change, but not necessarily. But here are the key challenges that are very specific for climate change. So you realize that there are no clear guidelines on how climate impacts might be considered. So you go through the convention text, you do not find any working party, for example, that is specific on climate change. Only the IOTC, for example, has passed a resolution that aims to address, issues of impact of climate change on tunas, but none of the other three have any working party or any resolution on transboundary fisheries. There's no early warning system that is designed to address, these sporadic extreme events that are highly driven by climate change. The region is not prepared to deal with ocean-based disasters, although there are efforts that have been done in terms of deploying a network of buoys within the region, but most of these buoys are not operational. And for those that are operational, the data that is coming from those infrastructure is not processed in a way that can provide good information that can be used again to understand the impact of that data, of that information. So in a nutshell, the region still remains very ill prepared to manage and adapt climate impacts and extreme events. And because of climate change, you realize that there's a lot of movement of fishers, like between Kenya and Tanzania. You find a lot of fishers moving, and they are basically driven by the migration of fish. And in turn, this movement of fish is driven by climate change. But then there's no clear policy on to manage this migration of fishers across countries. There's a lot of conflicts between countries and a lot of tensions as well, which goes back to the changes in climate change. So a no fisheries body at the moment is bold enough to enact or to come up with a resolution on how to deal with migration of tunas, which is linked to the rising ocean temperatures. Next. So with the transboundary issue being the main focus for our assessment, we realize that there's very limited enforcement on regulations. So there's still massive incidences of IUU fishing. So there's a lot of effort that has been done to come up with, MCS, vessel monitoring systems, the VMS, and monitoring, control, and surveillance. But again, most of these efforts have not been operational. They had discussions, but there's no consensus yet between countries on how to enforce regulations that address IUU fishing. There's clear overlap in terms of mandate by both national and regional authorities. Like, for example, you might see that under IOTC, there's a working party on tropical tunas. You go to Sea of C, there's another working party on the same, but you study the region or the data that they analyze is basically the same. So a clear overlap on the institutional structure as well. As I said, most of the fisheries are regulated by national laws, and these national laws are only limited within their territorial waters. Yet some of the stocks that are found in these waters are basically shared stocks. So the disconnect still exists in between the national laws and the regional laws. The national laws are binding. The regional laws are not, but sometimes the regional laws are more effective in terms of managing the resource compared to the national laws. And of course, there's the issue of disputes. There's a big dispute that ended the other day between Mauritius and Chagos. Another issue between Kenya and Somalia, and most of you would be familiar with the Kenyan situation where, Somalia is making the case that the line that should separate the two countries should follow the line that comes from the land. As you can see from the first figure, that the blue one, Kenya insists that it has to go equidistant to the land, and this case had to be taken all the way to the International Court of Arbitration in The Hague in Netherlands, and Kenya completely dismissed the line that is proposed by Somali, but of course, Somali is also making a case, and eventually the court ruled that anyway, maybe you get half and Somalia gets half. So they made the decision that the real line should be in between the two. So of course, still Kenya dismisses that line, but it's impossible for fishing vessels to access this disputed area because of that contest. Next. So what are the key interventions that we propose? We need to do proper planning. We need to have a regional policy that encompasses, different interests, considering the movement of fish or the distribution of fish. And we need a responsive decision-making procedure so that we can respond promptly to these disasters, because some of them come without any warning, and there has to be a mechanism upon which you can respond to emergencies. We need to revisit allocation agreements based on new fisheries. There's new information that is coming in, or the tax that were developed previously, those formulas may not be applicable anymore, considering the changes in distribution of fish. So that has to be revisited. Climate change will contribute to the creation of new fisheries. And so there will be winners and losers. So in a way, there has to be a mechanism where new fisheries that emerge, given the movement of fish, can also be regulated. Sometimes these fish go beyond, the boundaries of, the area of competence for a particular RFMO. So sometimes we might have to review those boundaries as well, given that specific species that are within the mandate of certain RFMOs might be going beyond those areas. And we need to enhance marine resilience in the sense that we need to strike a balance between the long-term ecosystem objectives and the economic objectives as well, because in many cases they do not necessarily go hand in hand. So there has to be a balance between those ecosystem and fisheries objectives. Next. And to better understand this process, we developed a new assessment criteria that takes into account the institutional characteristics, compliance and enforcement measures, as well as conservation and management measures. This criteria builds on previous work that was done by others, but in our approach, we considered key driving questions. Maybe you can click the next, that take into account studies that have specifically studied climate change. So it's an improvement to an existing criteria, but we've added around 21 new novel questions. So there are governance measures within that criteria. I may not discuss this right now because this is a paper that is currently under review in marine policy, might come out in the next few months, and I will be able to share with all of you all the driving questions and the governance measures that we've proposed in that assessment criteria. So the criteria is designed to effectively assess the preparedness and capacity of a regional fisheries body to respond to the emerging challenges of climate change on transboundary fisheries, not just in the Western Indian region, but beyond the Wheel region. Next. And from that assessment, we have come up with a few solutions that we feel should be taken into account by regional fisheries bodies, and this include robust monitoring and enforcement of the recommendation of management measures on conservation measures. We need full participation of member states because sometimes some member states, although they are signatories to these treaties, sometimes they fail to participate. And even when they participate, the language that is used in those scientific committee meetings, sometimes it's super complicated to the point that people return to their country without any idea what was discussed. So we need to support climate research and ecosystem science. We also need to develop a regional strategy for climate change adaptation. Next. And other aspects that needs to be taken into account include the adoption of precautionary and ecosystem approaches, to consider climate change in decision-making processes. At the moment, climate change is only mentioned is at the periphery. So there's only the general mention of climate change, but people do not necessarily understand or quantify the impacts of climate change on fisheries. But they know it's bad, but how bad it is, nobody knows. So there's also need for local and regional actors to give greater credence to climate change in their localized management regulations. Next. Yeah, and for the key messages that emerge from this study is that the key one, I would say, is the low institutional cooperation with climate data among governance institutions. So this emphasizes the need for interactions, for interactive governance. So member countries need to interact more, because we realize that there is a lot of disconnect in terms of the priorities that countries have, in terms of the regional fisheries bodies themselves. But this should not be a problem, but it's actually a basis for cooperation. So the more different they are, the more the reason for them to cooperate and share that information for that knowledge exchange across institutions. Next. And finally, I think this is kind of, I have addressed this perhaps in my, go to the next slide. Yeah, I think that's it for me. Thank you for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Mbaru, for that presentation. We have time for perhaps one or two quick questions before we turn to our second presentation. So if anyone has a question, feel free to either put it in the chat or unmute. And we will also should have time at the end of the webinar to ask questions of both presenters. So I'll open the floor to any questions that folks might have.
Thank you. Vivian Solis from Costa Rica. That was a wonderful presentation, and a lot of challenges, as we have heard. But I had a question concerning the stakeholders in that region. Is there any necessary prioritization for certain rights holders, like small-scale fishers in that sector? Because I imagine that there are not particular policies to support these people that have rights to live in the coast and survive. And this is different to other uses of that area and the fisheries especially. Just wondering if you had any comments on justice and equitable ways of doing that governance. Thank you.
Well, yeah, it's a very interesting question, and thank you for that concern. So at the moment, it's not very clear. Of course, the small-scale fishery is the most dominant in this region, and they are not that much involved in transboundary stock. They are not exploiting these stocks, so they are really not involved as much in terms of their views and all that. But of course, every country has its own priorities in terms of considering and giving space for these fisheries. I can only speak for maybe Kenya, Tanzania, and maybe Mozambique, because those are the countries I've been to many times, and the way they regulate their fisheries more or less the same, where you've got these decentralized institutions that are co-managing the fishery with the national government. So there is a recognition on the role in terms of managing. There is that recognition that even if some of them have this informal nature in terms of their existence, but they are still given space in terms of discussions that are related to the overall management of the larger fishery. I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but I guess there is good recognition for the small-scale fisheries by the national authorities in all these three countries. You may not have a lot of these, small-scale fisheries in South Africa, for example, or maybe in Mauritius, but it's more prevalent in the East African region. Yes, George. You're on mute.
No, I'm not mute.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering, with the largest fishing fleet, long distance and local in the world, is China involved? What's China's involvement in any of these formulations and in this work you're doing?
China is just another player in the industry, I guess. And so in Kenya, for example, the Chinese vessels can buy licenses to fish in the EEZ of these countries. And that has been happening for years now. But China is, of course, is not a member of any of these regional fisheries bodies. So it's not represented at all in these structures. However, I understand that SIOTFA, whose headquarters are in the Coco Islands, closer to Australia, there are 4 fishing companies there that are that actually were the pioneer companies that formed this agreement. And I'm not sure if the Chinese are behind these 4 companies, but I have a feeling like their participation might be not direct, but maybe indirect in that sense. But in terms of their, as far as I understand, they are basically vessels from China that can buy licenses to fish in the WIO waters, Western Indian Ocean waters.
I just was wondering, are they involved in any of this, any of the governance formulations or any of the regulations? Or
No,
no,
they are not involved in
yeah,
that.
they'd like to stay away. No.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And we might turn to our second presentation. I see that there's one more question in the chat that perhaps we can turn to at the end of the call. I want to turn it to Fernan Bustos, who's a biologist with expertise in marine and fisheries biology, developed through his prior experience and 3 years of work at the Catalan Institute of Research for the Governance of the Sea. And he will be presenting on adaptive fisheries assessment in a changing ocean. Just turning it over to you.
Hello, thanks, Laura. Let me share my screen. Okay, do you see it properly? Okay, hello everyone. Yeah, my name is Ferran Bustos. I work at ICATMAR, and today I will introduce you to the work we do at this project that is called Adaptive Fisheries Assessment in a Changing Ocean. So let's get started. First of all, what is ICATMAR? Well, ICATMAR is the Catalan Research Institute for the Governance of the Sea. It's a collaborative body jointly established by the Spanish National Research Council through the Institute of Marine Sciences of Barcelona and the Generalitat de Catalunya, which is the government of Catalonia. It's a region of Spain. It was created in 2017, and its mission is to provide high quality scientific advice to the administrations on topics related with the marine environment, especially in Catalonia, which is in the northwestern Mediterranean. As you can see here, it consists of 2 sections. The first one is the Fisheries Advisory Service. That's where Adaptive Fisheries Assessment in a Changing Ocean project is framed. And it started in 2018 with a program to monitor both recreational and commercial fisheries along the Catalan coast. In 2023, the Operational Oceanography Service was established, and it focuses on analyzing and predicting the physical characteristics of the ocean. So let's focus on the specific goals of the project. One of them, as I told before, is providing scientific advice to the administration for best management practices in fisheries governance. And how we do that? We're conducting an extensive and continuous monitoring of fishery resources along the Catalan coast. This allows us to gather long series of data, and we want to ensure that fisheries governance is based on scientific data rather than other considerations. We also want to make sure that all the insights gained are transferred to all the stakeholders, not just the administration. And how we do that, we participate in scientific conferences, we produce regular reports, scientific literature, and participate in many outreach activities to disseminate the knowledge generated. And last but not least, our ultimate goal is to promote sustainable and resilient fisheries in Catalonia and everywhere, of course. Okay, one of our key monitoring programs is marine recreational fisheries. It helped us have, for the first time, a picture of how this activity works here in this area. And it's an important activity. As you can see here, 45,000 licenses are issued every year. In order to monitor it, we use two different methodologies: online surveys that are sent to fishers each time a license is issued. In this map on the left, you can see where locations where the surveys were responded. It's not just in Catalonia, that's the area, but other parts of Spain and other countries in Europe. And on-site surveys that are conducted on the field. This helps us has a lot of information about the activity, such as the composition of what the people fish, and as this map show, like the distribution of and frequency of the main marine recreational fishing modalities along the coast. So far, we have conducted over 25,000 surveys. And now let's move to commercial fisheries. I want to provide you with some background. First of all, if you see the map on the left, Catalan commercial fisheries are markedly local. Okay, these colors that you see on the sea are fishing tracks of bottom trawlers. Each color represents the vessels of the base port closer that they have closer to the color. And well, these bottom trawlers are allowed to fish 12 hours per day, so they sail early in the morning and get back to the port in the afternoon. So they go fishing in waters just off their base port. Okay, the second map, it shows that fisheries are highly specialized. We identified and categorized 6 different métiers, differentiated by the species they catch and by depth. And based on those métiers, we designed the bottom trawling sampling. Bottom trawling is the first fishing modality we started to monitor. We embark in commercial vessels to do samplings from 9 different ports, so the entire coast is covered. And each sampling trip consists of 3 experimental holes at different depths. Here you can see the sampling holes conducted during 2024. The second main modality we monitor is purseine fishing. To do that, we buy batches of sardine and anchovy at fishing markets. And since 2022, we also embark on board commercial vessels, what provides us with more detailed information on how this fishery works. And here you can see as well the fishing tracks of the samplings and the locations where the batches we bought were fished and the fishing locations. And finally, we also monitor a few key small scale fisheries, specifically the ones that are managed under co-management committees. Apart from the monitoring, we also participate in those co-management committees as the scientific sectors. And for this, we monitor common octopus, sand eels as well, and blue crab. It's not represented in this map, but we also monitor it. It's present in the southern zone of the area. Okay, So this is a basic scheme of our sampling methodology. It varies depending on the fishing modality. But well, as I already explained, we embark on board commercial vessels. We carry GPS devices with us to record fishing tracks and different maneuvers. When the catch is on board, we identify all species and measure them, or a sample of them. Then we take a sample of certain target species to the laboratory for further analysis to get biological parameters. Apart from that, we also use external data, such as geolocation of vessels obtained from vessel monitoring systems, characteristics of the fleet, and data on daily landings provided by the administration. All this data is stored and centralized in a database from where we make extractions to do the pertinent analysis. And here are just a few figures, sampling indicators. As you can see, well, we've conducted almost 2,000 samplings already, have measured more than 500,000 specimens, and identified almost 500 species. Well, with this internal and external data, we conduct a series of analyses. For example, we can get catch composition. This is also for bottom trawling. We can get, in terms of biomass and abundance, we can get the catch composition of the commercial fraction, the discarded fraction, and marine litter and natural debris fractions. We also, based on the data on daily landings, we can elaborate catch distribution maps. In this case, this is for red mullet, and different kinds of fishing effort maps. Apart from that, we also get to know, have information about the structure of the populations of the species. Here you can see the length frequency distribution of hake across different métiers. And we also have information on the other biological parameters, such as the reproductive cycle. This is for sardine, and size at first maturity. In this case, is sandeel. Okay, most of this data is used to feed models for the assessment of fisheries stocks. That helps us understand what is the state of these marine resources. In addition, we also analyze the marine litter accidentally caught by bottom trawlers. And well, this map you see here is from a paper that is going to be published soon. This is a predictive map showing the distribution of marine litter along the coast. Okay, so our program allows us to quickly detect changes in the abundance of species or the appearance of invasive species, proving its usefulness as a tool for the assessment of potential climate impacts. And I'm going to show you a few examples. First of all, it's the case of the deepwater rose shrimp. This is a fishing resource that was very scarce in the early 2000s, and well, nowadays it's one of the most important fishery resources. It has increased over time, and we conducted a study where it was concluded that the rise of this species it's linked to an increase in the salinity and temperature levels of the water in the area. Another case is the northern brown shrimp. It was first detected in this area of the Mediterranean 2 years ago. The first citation of this species in the area was made by one member of our team. And now it's starting to be more abundant and more common. It's being caught more regularly. And finally, blue crab, it's another species that was very scarce, well, was first detected in the early 2000s, and now is a very important fishery resource in the southern area of Catalonia. And we're also monitoring that species, and apart from our monitoring program, we also participate in the blue crabs research program of the General Fisheries Commission of the Mediterranean. It is also worth mentioning that a member of our team is currently conducting a PhD to study the influence of climate change on the ships on marine fishery resources. Okay, now I'm going to talk about other management strategies that we strongly believe can help us move towards more sustainable fisheries. First of all, well, here you can see this is a network of marine protected areas that was established in 2021, thanks to the collaboration between fishers, the administration, and ICATMAR. It's almost 500 square kilometers. It's still too early to evaluate its efficiency, but we've done experimental samplings inside the one that was established the first, and with very positive results have been observed. Well, this is there are no take areas for demersal fishing, so bottom trawlers are not allowed to fish inside. The first figure on the right just shows that bottom trawlers are no longer fishing inside this area. And below there are photos just to show outside of the marine protected area and inside. So it can be seen that inside the habitat has recovered, and you can see these Norway lobsters have already built their burrows. And other management strategies are the use of pelagic otter boards. As you probably know, otter boards from bottom trawlers are very heavy and drag along the seabed, causing a considerable damage to the ecosystem. So we are promoting the use of these pelagic otter boards that are not in contact with the seafloor, and therefore the impact is much lower. We also think that the selectivity of fishing gear should improve. This figure is from a study we conducted, where we concluded that by increasing 5 millimeters the mesh of the net, the number of hake juveniles would significantly reduce, but the commercial fraction would not be affected. And what are the tangible outcomes of the work we do? Well, here are official documents of the Spanish and Catalan governments, and one from the European Union too, where they incorporated recommendations from our scientific monitoring in fisheries policy. Now I want to show you a bit our website. We launched it 2 years ago already. There you can find who we are, what we do, download all our publications and material, and our flagship tool, which is the Fisheries Viewer. I will show it to you later. Well, in the publication sections, as I said, you can download the research papers, work from students, technical reports, and these are the reports that we publish annually and regularly. The first one is economic evolution of catches. We do it with information with the data on daily landings and vessel monitoring systems. With information of the marine recreational fishing monitoring with the state of marine recreational fisheries every year. Then with information of the commercial fisheries monitoring, we produce the state of fisheries and a stock assessment of the most important commercial species. And with all this information, we finally publish the fisheries advisory with recommendations to improve sustainability of fisheries. And this is our fisheries viewer. I'm going to show you. So here you can access the map, then you can check fishing efforts maps by biomass, by incomes, and by fishing time. Then you can select a specific haul, and you can see the catch composition. You can check the commercial fraction, the discarded fraction, and the marine litter as well. It's linked to external data from Copernicus, so you can check as well environmental condition present during the fishing. This is the commercial fraction as well. I encourage you to use it because it's quite entertaining and interesting. And apart from that, you have also other features such as checking thermal anomalies, chlorophyll, sea currents, and another. Okay, another possibility that the fisheries viewer offers is to check the length frequency distribution of every species we've been sampling during the 5 years of the monitoring program. Here in this example, we selected hake. This is the general length frequency distribution. and you can select it. You can compare it by year, by season, by métier, by region, or any combination of these categories to make a more accurate comparison. No, here we selected 2023 coastal chef métier and the south region, center region here. Well, this is just to show you that these fisheries viewers are adapted to mobile phones, because we detected that fishers, that's one of our target audiences, use mainly phones rather than desktop computers. So we adapted the fisheries viewer. And well, I'm about to finish now. This is just to show you that the knowledge we generate is shared at different levels. At a local level, as already mentioned, we embark with fishers, we collaborate with them. We also go visit regularly the fishing guides to present our work, and we also participate in these co-management committees. At the level of Catalonia, we provide advice to the administration regarding about fisheries governance. At the level of Spain, we also hold regular meetings and prepare reports for the Secretariat of Fisheries of the Spanish government. At the European level, we also participate in meetings and also in work groups for the assessment of stocks at the General Fisheries Commission of the Mediterranean and the Scientific Technical Economical Committee for Fisheries. And internationally, well, since we've been endorsed as an Ocean Decade project, we're participating in activities like this one and many others. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention and your time, and for the opportunity to share our work with you in this forum.